Why would they call it a mallow cup and put coconut in it? It doesn't even say coconut on it. It says whipped cream center.
How do you know it's coconut?
It's coconut. Like, I know what coconut is. I got the pieces right now in my mouth. Welcome to our podcast, where today we are going to be talking about the movie Spider-Man Homecoming that just recently came out in theaters. So, we are going to spoil every single thing about this movie. So, if you haven't seen it yet and you don't want anything spoiled about the movie, probably should hit pause, go see the movie first, and then come back and join us and leave us some feedback.
And we're also going to be doing a ranking of all the previous Spider-Man films and referencing them throughout the review of Spider-Man Homecoming. So really, we're going to spoil everything related to Spider-Man, maybe even some comics, I don't know. So definitely get all of your Spider-Man ducks in a row if you care before listening to this one.
We both saw the new Spider-Man Homecoming movie. We did not see it together. We saw it separately on different days. I saw it over the weekend with my family. And so we have not talked yet about what our thoughts are on the movie. So you could hate the movie, you could love it, or vice versa, and we don't know yet. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dig into it. So I wanted to just kind of start off with talking about the newest addition to the Marvel Universe. What was your first impressions, overall thoughts on Spider-Man Homecoming?
So I went and saw it with my wife, who actually hasn't seen Civil War yet. So this was her completely first introduction to was it Tom Holland?
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was also interesting the opening, you know, how it kind of starts out with the cell phone footage.
Yeah.
I thought that was awesome, but about a couple minutes into it, all of a sudden I realized my wife has no context for what they're talking about at all. It was really, really random. But I talked to her about it afterwards, and she actually said, like, after a couple minutes, she was really, really confused, and then she just went, "Oh yeah, he was in the other one, wasn't he?" And then it just didn't bother her at all.
Yeah, because there was no origin story in this one. Thank God. It just kind of...
Yes, that was the other thing she said. She was like, I realized a couple minutes in that they must be referencing the other one, and then I thought, oh, we don't have to watch him get bit by a spider again.
Right.
And she was very excited.
Like, you don't really have to do that with these iconic characters, especially when you're rebooting them, because I was kind of thinking that when Man of Steel rebooted a couple of years ago, like, I loved the backstory stuff they did that just because I like sci-fi stuff and it was like super sci-fi. But they didn't really need to do a backstory for Superman. Everybody knows his backstory. They could have just jumped in and done just a Superman movie. They could have even done it with the same villain and everything. And it was kind of the same thing back when they rebooted Spider-Man a couple of years ago with Andrew Garfield. I remember, like, I initially, like, I did like that movie. It was okay, but that was another one where it's like, I don't need a slightly inverted version of his backstory again. We all know it. We could just do another movie.
Right. I feel like if you're going to try and redo an origin story, you need to do it really differently. Like, I wasn't actually really that big of a fan of Man of Steel, but
I was.
at least on that one, they did this sort of more space opera-y thing. Like, they could do a lot more with the effects than they did back then.
Yeah.
So, and I haven't seen all the older ones, so maybe they did the exact same thing there. But I've seen the original one, and they didn't do that there, right?
Marlon Brando was Superman's dad back in the old ones, and the Christopher
But
Reeves.
they didn't do a whole bunch of like the space stuff.
No,
right?
it wasn't like an extended thing. It's always been kind of the shorthand, like something's wrong with Krypton. They sent him off in a spaceship, and all the versions of it, including the cartoon show from the '90s, I can think of. They always have some thing like that.
Gotcha.
But it's never, because the Man of Steel was like a 2.5 hour movie, and the first 30 minutes of it was all on that planet.
Right. There was quite a bit of it.
Yeah. But all that to say, this isn't a Superman episode. But all of that to say, though, like with these bigger characters, it's okay to just jump in. And that's kind of what they did with this movie. And I think that was the best choice that Marvel Studios did. Instead of, I mean, even though this was a reboot, technically, for the second time, they knew how to handle it knowing that they were already doing that. So they didn't have any other choice but to reboot it, really. I mean, they could have thrown Andrew Garfield in, but all those there probably would have been complications with,
Well, and it would have been so confusing story wise because,
yeah,
like, there was a giant lizard that had terrorized
New York.
Manhattan before the Avengers and all of the other Marvel-y things. It just would have been like, where's he been the whole time?
Right.
So I definitely think that was the track that they had to go down, and I'm definitely glad they did it the way they did.
So overall, then, did you like the movie? What was kind of your impression? You
Yes.
did. Okay.
So yeah, it was weird. It was actually, I don't know if it was the setting I was in. We ended up at one of those fancy. It was at the 5-star lounge,
Right.
Warenberg here, and there's people that walk around and serve you food the whole time.
Yeah.
And so it took me a really long time to get over the fact that people would walk in front of me in the middle of the movie. Like, that was driving me crazy.
Yeah.
So that may have been.
I don't understand
I
that.
wasn't
That's a
crazy about
weird because it's supposed to be more luxurious. And I guess I get it. Like, if you're taking someone on a date and you want to impress them, like, that way you don't have to keep getting up and stuff. But I go to the movies to pay attention.
Right.
So, like, people walking around all the time, yeah, it's just kind of a distraction. That's one of those things where you're paying more for the extra luxury, and it's kind of a weird step
Well,
down
luckily,
to me. I like that
It
movie.
wasn't actually our intention to go there, but the place we were going to go was sold out.
Yeah.
Or they didn't have any good spots, and they still did the $5 movie tickets at the super nice place. So we were going to the super nice place, but we were not paying super nice prices.
Right.
So that helped.
Yeah, I just like the mid-range stuff that's just a,
Right.
a
Comfy
comfortable
chair, but
seat.
still.
Yeah, the higher end seats are fine, but I don't need people walking around.
All that to say, I thought that the beginning of the movie was really fun and entertaining, but felt to me like more like Marvel movie. It
Yeah.
was entertaining, but I wasn't going to remember it. But somehow this movie actually like crescendoed. Usually I feel like the opening act is my favorite, and then the third act is where things start to fall apart. And this one was a reverse. I really, really, by the end of the movie, I was just enjoying everything and I wanted to keep going.
Well, if you recall from our first episode, I was hesitant originally with this movie. Not that I wouldn't have seen it or that I don't like Spider-Man, but I was kind of worried that it would just be kind of lackluster. And I did have some issues with some things in the movie, which we'll get into. But overall, it was kind of what I thought may have happened, which is I got into it, and once I was there in the movie, I loved it. Like, it won me over pretty quickly. And so my overall impression of it is I liked it quite a bit. So, success on my
Yes.
part.
There you go. Wrap it up.
Yeah.
We're done here.
What did you think of the story then overall?
I thought it was actually a unique, interesting story. We had talked previously about how we were worried about Iron Man being involved.
Yeah.
And I thought not only did they like pull off working it in, to the larger picture, but I thought it actually made the movie better.
Mm-hmm.
Like a standalone Spider-Man movie wouldn't have been able to play around with these themes the way that this one did, where like Tony Stark was sort of the father figure and
Yeah.
Spider-Man felt smaller because he lived in a universe with, Thor and the Hulk and everything. And so I was really, really wanting a small scale superhero movie. And I feel like it was actually a smaller scale because being somebody who can fly around New York and fight crime is still kind of like small potatoes compared to flying around the universe and fighting aliens. So
Right.
I found that really, really impressive. And I wasn't expecting that at all.
Yeah, I like that you say that, like, it still felt kind of small scale in a way. I mean, granted, they did go to Washington, D.C., etc. There were big set
Yeah, but
pieces.
even that, it was like in the context of a high schooler. Like it felt like, oh, how am I going to do this? Oh, I can take my school bus trip to get there. And like,
Yeah.
he couldn't just get anywhere he wanted to.
Yeah, and one of my concerns, as we discussed on a previous episode, was that I would be bugged by how connected it was to the Marvel Universe. And I find myself in a really weird place because it was connected, obviously. Like, a lot of the plot elements were connected to the Marvel Universe. Like, you couldn't have had the Vulture, who was the villain, without it being connected to like tech that they got from Tony Stark from after the incident in the first Avengers movie.
Right.
But with all those elements, you're absolutely right. It made him feel like he was getting started trying to impress the bigger people that have already been established in the world. So in that way, it kind of pushed him into this smaller neighborhood type feel. And even though you know that other universe is there, it didn't really overlap too much. Like Tony Stark's assistant was probably the only thing that was heavily constantly throughout the movie, and that was really funny. And all of
Oh
his
yeah.
interactions. What's his name again? I can't believe I forgot him.
I mean, it's Happy.
Yeah,
John
Happy,
Favreau
right.
is the
Yeah, John Favreau, but
right,
Happy, I was
director
trying to
of the
think of
first Iron Man, and
yeah,
then
the character name. So
yeah, he
yeah,
set himself up for a long universe of movies of money making, didn't he?
yeah. And I don't know, but with all of my original worries about that, I kind of look at it now and it's like it's weird. I'm okay with all of those heavy connections, which I originally thought would really bug me because I wanted Spider-Man to be self-contained. And in a weird way, even though there were those connections there, it felt self-contained. It felt like a Spider-Man movie.
Yeah. Well,
So
like Ant-Man, I remember had like these random moments where it was like, oh, that's right, this is part of this universe. And I
yeah,
hated all of those. Like there was that scene where he like fought the Falcon and that was just awful.
yeah, in
I
upstate New
mean, not
York.
awful, but it was just like, oh, this is only here to like
Yeah,
fit into this universe. And then they would randomly bring up the Avengers and stuff.
right.
Whereas this one, it felt like that was like necessary for the story. It was like they took this universe that they had built and then they told a tiny story inside of that universe
Right.
where it could only exist there.
Which is what the Netflix shows, save Iron Fist, have been doing so well.
You know, I feel like those have done really well telling small scale stories, but those stories are almost completely devoid of any real connection to the universe. Like they casually mention it every once in a while.
Yeah, I was gonna say they're connected in a sense that, like, I remember when Daredevil started, they still like there was like a throwaway line that was like the reason why all of this crime is on the rise in Hell's Kitchen, where he's at, is because of fallout from the incident in New York, which they're
Right,
clearly
but you could get rid of that line and still tell that whole story.
true, correct.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And like because they just don't have the budget to show mass destruction or whatever, so they like casually mention it, but those
Yeah.
stories could totally exist devoid of the rest of the universe. Whereas this, it was like Spider-Man was small because of the context of all these other movies.
yeah, and I really like that. The other
Yeah, I thought it was awesome.
One of the other things, like tonally, that I wasn't fully prepared for was I realized it's a Marvel movie and they were going to be funny, but I didn't expect it to be so high school involved. Like it felt like I won't say it
They
felt like an
actually
80s.
felt like high school kids.
Yeah, and I'm not going to say it felt like one of those high school 80s movies, but there was a vibe like that to it because it was just like all the kids were age appropriate. It wasn't Tobey Maguire pretending to be a high schooler or even Andrew Garfield that still just looks 5 years too old for that.
Right.
And like everyone felt like they belonged there. They looked the part, and like all of the drama and everything was it felt authentic and not ham-fisted. And
So
like
I actually had written down this was totally a coming of age story.
yeah.
Like it felt like a ET or Super 8 or like Stranger Things, you know what I mean? It was like
Yeah.
a bunch of nerdy friends in a situation bigger than themselves and kind of learning how to grow up and learning about the world. And like that was really cool to see in a giant big budget superhero movie because I can't think of at least any other of the MCU movies, but really I can't think of any superhero movies like that.
Yeah.
So it was actually unique. It wasn't like, oh, they told a normal superhero story with this twist. It was like the whole premise was interesting and the themes they explored were interesting.
Right. Like Marvel is definitely starting to do this now where stuff becomes more genre specific. And those I'm finding more and more are the ones that I like from them. Like for instance, I did like Winter Soldier, but even that was kind of a soft spy thriller. There's other
Right.
people that would disagree and say, "Oh no, it was full on. It was like a whole different genre." I don't really think it did. I thought that still felt comfortable within the rest of the Marvel line up until that point. But then somewhere, I think honestly, I think Guardians of the Galaxy was the first like standout where it's like, "Oh, this is a space opera set in the Marvel universe."
Right.
And then I think Doctor Strange, even though it wasn't everyone's favorite, it still was well reviewed. And I feel like that was the next one where it's like, oh, this is this weird, like, niche magic corner of the universe that deals with all this bizarre, crazy stuff that's just out there. And then this kind of felt like, oh, it's like a high school, like you said, coming of age movie. And I'm finding that like those are the ones that I like the most, I think, of
Right.
all the stuff that's happened so far. And
Yeah, I'm
honestly, that's
definitely getting
why,
fatigued of the like event movies.
right. which is weird because I feel like that's what they've been setting up as this big event, but I do wonder how that's going to turn out when all this stuff comes down with the Infinity Gauntlet, or they're
Right.
calling it Infinity
How
Wars
I don't really hear
storyline.
anybody getting all like super excited about that anymore.
I'm sure it will be big.
I mean, I'm sure it'll be big in the way that it'll have a giant marketing blitz and everybody will see it, but
Right.
it's kind of like, and this is what I felt about Civil War too. It was fine, but there
Yeah.
was nothing about it that like
It
was
was an
super
Avengers
exciting. It
movie.
was just a big budget. There's a lot of characters,
Yeah.
which means none of them are going to get that much time,
Right.
and cool stuff's going to happen, but that's it.
Right.
But the ones that are really fun are when they all split back up and they get their own movies. Like even Thor looks like it's going to be entertaining, and I've never been a big fan of those.
Yeah, I will say this: Thor looks amazing, but and I'm not saying at all that they're ripping off of Guardians of the Galaxy, because I've heard about the director that's doing the new Thor Ragnarok. Apparently, like a lot of people really like him. I don't know anything
That's
about
like his
him.
M. I had never heard of him, but my
Yeah,
Twitter feed blew up with everybody repeating his name all excitedly
yeah.
whenever they announced it. So
And apparently he's done movies like that, not comic book movies, but I don't know, whatever he's doing thematically. And so I don't know what that means. So I don't mean to say that he's in any way just aping what Guardians of the Galaxy movies have done. But I will say, like, Thor to me looks amazing, but it doesn't really look like it's doing anything too crazily different from Guardians of the Galaxy. It
that's
looks
true.
like it's kind of following, and it's like, oh, well, Guardians really pulled off the space opera thing. Why don't we just put Thor in that
Right.
in
Yeah,
that
that's a
role?
good point.
And again, that's not to knock it, because it looks hilarious and it looks like a lot of fun, and it probably will be. But yeah,
But
so
not as unique.
not quite as defined as like at least the three that Guardians, Spider-Man, and Doctor Strange.
Yeah, it's kind of surprising that who is it? Fox, whoever it is that has X-Men. It's surprising that Logan beat him to the punch on the Western.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I didn't even think of that. And Deadpool with the over-the-top crass comedy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that was James Gunn's big thing after Deadpool came out, wasn't it? Didn't he do a big post about how everybody's going to want to make a rated R movie now, but this movie was good because it was different.
I think he said the industry will take the wrong lessons from this, and instead of seeing this was succeeding because it was original and a great thing that they did, they're going to see it was rated R, so we need to make more rated R movies.
Right.
Which, yeah, I mean, some things could be rated R. Like Logan being rated R was fine, because that's one of those things that's always been kind of, well, he's got metal claws and we know he's ripping people to shreds, but we're not allowed to see it type thing.
And it was rated R as a Western.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, oh, we need to make a rated R movie and they made a crass rated R movie. It wasn't that at all. It was very careful and measured in the way that it portrayed violence. Like it wasn't a positive thing. Except for, was I with
Yes.
you whenever we saw that and we were by that lady that every single time he did something that you were supposed to be like, oh man, he's like murdering somebody and he has to feel the weight of this, she'd go, oh
Yeah, there were a lot of
man.
people that were in there just to see gore, and not the former vice president, but the him just ripping people apart. It's a bad joke. Let's pivot hard. Please clap. So I had a question for you. How did you feel about the lack of a Mary Jane / Gwen Stacy character, or was there one? Is the question.
Well, that's actually interesting. So the whole movie, I was thinking like, man, what was the his crush's name?
The one he liked, or the girl that liked him?
Yeah, the one he liked.
I don't remember.
Right. My point exactly.
Yeah.
I was just like, man, she is just flat, and like I didn't feel like she was that interesting, and
She
they
felt
didn't
more
really
like
do
a
her.
plot device.
Yeah, they didn't develop her very well, and I was like, man, that's kind of like disappointing. And then at the reveal of her dad, which we'll talk about probably later, but at
Yeah.
that reveal, I went, okay, makes sense. Like they're obviously not going to make Mary Jane's dad be the villain, but
Right.
like that was kind of a cool thing that they did.
Yeah.
Good on them. And then at the end, whenever the friend who was kind of the social activist person, you know,
Yeah.
always wouldn't take part in anything. Whenever she said, "Oh, my friends call me MJ" or whatever, for whatever reason, I didn't put that together. I felt kind of stupid that I didn't put that together, but I
Mhm.
was like, "Oh, like that makes so much sense now." And my wife was just like, "Wasn't that obvious from the very beginning?"
But to me, it was weird because her name wasn't even that initials, though.
What was her name?
It wasn't that. Like I remember thinking, like I don't remember it now in retrospect, but I remember thinking, but they've been calling you XYZ this entire time. Why would that be your nickname? And I'll tell you what it reminded me of. It reminded
I
me
think I know what you're going
of.
to say.
Do you? What am I
I
gonna say?
I have a guess. Is it Star Trek, the second
No,
Star Trek? Oh,
no.
okay.
It's Dark Knight Rises. At the very end,
Oh, yeah.
where where they just go, "Oh, Robin, that's your real name," and I was just like,
Yeah.
"What?" It's like, okay,
We didn't need that.
I like you,
He could have
Christopher
had a different
Nolan.
name.
Thank you for this movie, but that makes no sense on any level because it was just kind of like tacked on there. But it was like, yeah, but you're calling him like Detective Blake throughout this whole movie. He has a different first name. Like, no, there are literally 6 Robins, if not more, and none of them are named that. And so it just didn't make any sense on any level. It's like, oh, they just
It
nicknamed.
was
So like,
just there to like so
yeah,
that nobody would see it coming.
yeah. And so like, that's what this felt like was. Now maybe I could be wrong. I'm looking it up right now, so we'll find out here in just a second.
I know. I'm trying to find it.
I'm just gonna search cast, but
I'm on the cast. I
it's
just
the actress's name.
Oh, you know her name.
Yeah, okay. I guess her name was Michelle. But see, that's what I'm saying. That doesn't make sense.
Is that her? She looks a lot older in this picture.
Yeah, that's her. That's the one
Okay.
that was playing her. So yeah, that's what was weird. Like they were calling her Michelle throughout the whole movie, and
That makes sense.
it's like, oh, her initials are, and it's like, but but her name's Mary Jane. It's not. Mary isn't even anything for Michelle. Why would you change that? I don't know.
Yeah, I guess I see what you're saying. But
I don't have a problem with her
if her
playing
name
Mary
was
Jane.
Mary Jane the whole
Yeah,
time, then I would have then it I don't know, it would have been not distracting, but you wouldn't have ever been rooting for um Peter Parker and Liz, whatever the other girl's name was. You would have never been rooting for that because you're just like, oh yeah, this is
I,
just in between him and Mary Jane.
yeah. I don't know what they could have done differently, but I feel like still just kind of strikes me weird. Like it's
Yeah,
not a big deal. Like I said, if she ends up being Mary Jane or MJ going
she'll change
forward,
her name.
I have no issues with it. Like like she's fine, but yeah, I just
I thought it
remember
was cool.
thinking like, okay,
I
that's
also
fine.
like that she was different. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
She wasn't just a lesser version of
Kirsten Dunst.
yes. It wasn't like, oh, like there's not even a comparison. They're just totally different characters. Like
Yeah,
she's got a really interesting different type of personality and
yeah,
I just thought that was really cool. And I like that she was nerdy too.
yeah, yeah. I'm fine with all of that. I'm not one of those people that's gonna throw a big
Purist.
fit about like about like racial switches of characters or anything like that.
Oh,
Like
yeah,
all of
yeah.
that's fine. I mean, it doesn't really bug me in the least bit. So I don't have any issue with that. Like some people would. It's just like I just thought the weird name tack on at the end was weird. I was really hoping that Donald Glover's name in the movie would have
Would be
been Miles
Miles.
Morales.
Yeah, I know.
That would have been amazing. Like maybe they didn't even have to confirm it, but if they could just table it for the time being and name him Miles and never
Which
say his
you should
last
probably
name.
clarify. Spider-Man, Peter Parker in the comics. I don't know the actual story behind
I'll
this. I just
I'll
know that.
I'll
Yeah, you can
explain.
probably explain it better than me.
So in the comic books, back in the early 2000s, Marvel revamped their entire line by doing like I guess what they called like Ultimate series. So you had like Ultimate Spider-Man, Ultimate X-Men, Ultimate Hulk, stuff like that. You know, kind of get the theme. And somewhere along that lines, there was an additional Spider-Man that came out of that, and I believe Miles Morales started somewhere within those years while they were doing the Ultimate stuff.
But it was, I mean,
And
he was in the universe with Peter Parker, right?
yeah,
Wasn't it
yeah,
like
he didn't
handed down to him
replace
or
Peter
something?
Parker. It was just another title. And it was one of those, like, a lot of times, like, all of those additional characters are hit and miss, whether you're in Marvel or DC. Like, so, like, whenever they do another Flash or another Green Lantern,
Right.
sometimes they're meaningless and nobody cares about them. And then sometimes, like, people surprisingly just really take an attachment to them. And
But
Miles
Miles was,
Morales was one that immediately became a really popular
yeah.
character. It
Like,
wasn't one
I
of
don't
those
follow it, and I knew
just
who he was.
yeah, yeah. And there's actually been a couple of those like spider characters that have like I think another one is Gwenpool, but I'm gonna be honest, I really don't know how popular Gwenpool is.
Gwenpool?
Yeah, it's like a weird again, I know nothing about Gwenpool. It's like a
Wait,
weird
what is this?
comedy female mashup of like Spider-Man and Deadpool, and it's definitely within the Marvel universe.
That sounds fantastic. I don't know why. Does she do the genre or the fourth wall break thing?
I don't think so. It's not like that. It is
Okay.
its own character, but I've heard that it's funny and that I think it's more attached to Spider-Man, but honestly, it's one of those characters I have never it's not crossed my reading materials, so I can't really say
Right.
much about it. There might be someone listening right now that's like a huge Gwenpool fan is just like beating their head against the wall because I'm getting it all wrong.
Well, if that person is out there, they should go to our Facebook page and yell at Dan for it.
Yep, yep.
That's what they should do.
Tell us what Gwenpool is and what she does and
Yeah,
all that sort of
explain
thing.
everything.
So, all of that to say, I was hoping that Donald Glover would be that person because there was a thing for a while. Like, there was some, like, internet, like, one of those documents going around trying, whenever Marvel originally cut this deal with Sony to bring Spider Man into the MCU, there was this whole thing going around the internet or something to that effect that wanted Donald Glover to play the next Spider Man. And, uh, and that's why a lot of people were kind of like, well, he's in the movie.
Right.
So
When
it
you
would
saw
be
his name attached, I got really excited. But
right.
he's definitely gotten too old.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
really exciting when you were thinking, Troy from Community as Spider-Man, but
Right. But now
now
he's like
you'd be
what, mid
thinking
30s?
Childish Gambino as Spider-Man, and that's a really weird
Right.
thing to think about.
But if they came out with a movie with him playing Spider-Man, I would
Oh yeah, I would excitedly see
yeah.
it.
Did you hear what he said? Like I'm not going to try and impersonate his stand-up routine, but he was saying that like back whenever that went around, like he shared it on like Twitter or Reddit or something like that because he thought it was awesome, and he said that there was like all these like really mad fanboys that were like Peter Parker is a white guy, he's not a black guy, and he said that there was some commenter that said this would be like casting Michael Cera as Shaft. And he said that's the only time that he's actually replied to someone, and he said he was just like, "Yes, let's make that happen."
That would be amazing.
Just imagine Michael Cera just walking around in like Harlem. Oh god. But anyways.
For some reason, it's the Scott Pilgrim version of Michael Cera, so he's just challenging people to fights.
Yeah.
But then it immediately ends in him getting just beat up.
What did you think about Spider-Man himself? Tom Holland as Spider-Man. We've already kind of touched on it a little bit, like with the high school theme and everything, but what did you think about him as an actor, him as Spider-Man? What did you think about his suit? That sort of thing.
I thought he was awesome. It was exciting to see like an actual high schooler Spider-Man. Like I think he's like 21 or something, but he really acted and felt like an actual high schooler.
Right.
It felt like he was making all the dumb mistakes, kind of like we were talking about. It's like one of those coming of age, almost like 80s style movies where it's him and his friend kind of nerding out over what's happening while at the same time it being really serious, and the
Right.
adults just don't get it kind of thing. He also just felt like an actual nerd. Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield never really felt like they did the Peter Parker bit. They weren't nearly as like nerdy, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
They were
Absolutely.
uncomfortable to listen to. Like they were socially awkward. They both nailed that.
Right.
but they didn't get they weren't as believable, solving math equations or wearing like geeky, like he was wearing those nerdy t-shirts all the time,
Yeah.
which given my profession and the where I work, I appreciated. He had a whole bunch of those throughout the movie, and I thought those were all awesome.
He also had a bit of an actual hint of a New York accent, though. That was another thing I noticed that I really
Yeah.
liked. Like he
Isn't he
actually,
British?
I don't know.
I think I read that. I've never actually seen anything about him. I don't know if I've seen him in anything before, so but yeah, I thought the same thing. Like he felt like he actually lived there.
Yeah,
His
exactly.
whole interactions with the deli guy,
Yeah.
and who was it? It was him and Vulture, I think at the end they were like arguing over the best pizza joint or something, weren't they?
I don't remember that. I don't remember
There
the
there
line.
was a scene where no, it was him and Donald Glover.
Oh, that's right.
Whenever they were
Yeah.
talking, it was like this serious conversation, and all of a sudden they got into a little argument about the best like sandwich in town or something. And it was
Right.
just those little things. I feel like the only other one that was like that was Spider-Man 2, the second Tobey Maguire one. He really felt like he was part of the city.
Yeah. Yeah. They were out of the high school realm where he didn't really look like he fit, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It wasn't like that
so it
was.
was more believable.
We were just watching it before this, the first one, kind of catching up
Mhm.
because I just got excited thinking about it. And those high school scenes, it was like half of the extras and actors looked like they were like out of college, and then the other
Yeah.
half looked like they did belong there, and it was super weird. Yeah, it was like a 30-year-old, shooting a spitball. It's like,
Right. One thing I really liked that they did was it felt like they really laid into his whole inexperience with his superpowers.
yes.
Like he felt like a young kid not knowing what he was doing. And my favorite thing, which I'm sure you'll remember from the movie, was they addressed head on the whole what does Spider-Man do when he's not in the city argument. Like he's useless if he doesn't have
Oh
things to swing
yeah,
around on, and he just
yeah. That
ran
kind of
out on that
goes.
golf course.
And then he
That
just
was so
that wide
great.
shot with him just running across
Yeah.
the golf course. That was what I was talking about earlier, where it was like it he didn't feel all powerful. Like for him to get to DC, he had to figure out a way to get there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It wasn't like, oh, I can just, Spider-Man my way over there. He had to like solve it somehow. There
Right.
was one thing. So this is something I didn't get. I feel like there's probably an answer and I just missed it. But like in the third act, whenever he left the dance and he was gonna go, like he knew it was gonna go on and he had to get somewhere. And he stole the guy's car and was driving his car, which that whole scene was
Yeah.
hilarious. But why did he need the car?
I guess because they're in the suburbs, it just wasn't as easy to get around. And they
Were they
kind
in
of
the suburbs? I thought they
illustrated
were in the
that.
city.
Maybe you're right. I felt like he was like driving past like houses and stuff and trees. It wasn't really like in the thick of the city where his apartment was.
Okay.
I could be completely wrong. We may go back and watch that movie again and be like, yeah, you're right.
Right.
But I felt like there was a reason he was in the car. Because like earlier in that movie, like in that scene where he went through the golf course, and then he was actually swinging through like a suburbs, not quite skyscraper, and he was just like on shingles and constantly falling and crashing into stuff, and that was
Whenever he was chasing that car down, yeah, that was great. He was just so bumbling.
yeah,
I really, really liked that.
yeah,
Like he didn't just magically understand how to do everything perfectly.
right.
It's like he was building up skills and learning on the job kind of the whole time.
What did you think about the suit? Because there was a lot of buzz coming out as the trailers were being released before the movie that there was sort of this like reservedness about, well, Spider-Man's suit isn't really supposed to be like high tech and all these crazy visuals inside the mask and stuff like that. Or at least some people were saying that. So, what did you think about the look and the suit itself, the AI that was inside the suit, all that sort of thing?
So I would say, we didn't see I didn't see the trailers at all, so I didn't know that going in. I just knew from Civil War that it was a little bit advanced, but they didn't really go into any of that in that movie.
Yeah.
I would have had the exact same reservations. Like, again, I like that Spider-Man's a little more realistic is obviously the wrong word, but like feels a little more just small scale and like limited in scope on what he can do. Like he's not bulletproof, he can't
Right.
fly. But I thought it worked in this perfectly well. Now, if there's a future one where he like understands all the things his suit can do, I could see where that would get really annoying really fast.
Yeah.
Because he did have quite a few, it was almost Superman territory of like things he can do. Like,
Yeah,
oh,
like all the
I
different
have,
web options and
yeah, like I have ice, you know, I can
yeah.
freeze people and I can melt people and I mean, they weren't doing that, but there's a point where you're like, it gets into Harry Potter territory of like, why didn't you just magic him?
It's like what is I don't know what the plot device is called, but I think me and one of my friends have always referred to it as like the electronic screwdriver from Doctor Who. It's the same
Yeah,
thing that like R2D2 is. It's sort of the device that's whatever.
it's Ex Machina, right?
Well, yeah, okay, yeah. I guess that is kind of the same thing. It's a device though, and instead of necessarily a plot device per
Sure.
se,
Yeah,
but I
yeah.
guess it is a device that just does whatever you need it to do to move the plot forward.
But what
And
they
so, yeah, I
did in
guess,
this that I thought worked is they made him just like not good at it. So that helped a lot.
yeah, they made it
But
funny.
the
They
other
had,
thing that was really important, I feel like, was everything was established, usually with a joke. But like
yeah,
everything he used against the Vulture, I think they had established that that was a thing he had early on. Like
yeah,
he electrocuted him at one point through something, and it was like earlier on that they accidentally had him shoot that out. I feel like that makes a giant difference with those types of things. And supposedly, I haven't read all the Harry Potter books, but I watched the movies. And like that's what everybody always tells me about the books is yes, like they can magic everything. In the movies it's kind of annoying, but in the books like there's all these rules that are well explained and you don't feel like it's cheap, if that makes sense.
yeah. There's established rules that she followed. And that's kind of the sign of any good science fiction or fantasy is you're obviously dealing with things that aren't real, and it's good to kind of establish things before just throwing them
Right.
out.
You want to believe that you could have guessed like, "Oh, that's what you should have done or could have done."
Right.
But as like if this character lives on for a long time, they're going to are they going to keep piling on to the things that we go, "Well, in that movie he could do this. Why didn't he do that here?" That's where it
Yeah.
gets a little dicey. And I guess Iron Man's probably in that territory now too.
I actually thought I was going to hate that the suit was super high tech, but I really actually enjoyed even the AI part of it. Even though to my knowledge, I haven't read anything with Spider-Man in it that had AI suit or anything. There
But
may be some version
I'm
of
good
it
with
that it
the
was based
movies.
off of.
Actually, I'd like the movies to be different. Like, and especially
Yeah.
because AI and all that stuff is very integrated into kind of this Marvel universe they have going. So it fit
Right.
very well into that world. Also, I really did like his expressive eyes.
Yes, that was great.
Yeah, I thought that adds a lot.
It was such a great reason to have those
Right.
because in the comic book you can do that, and even though it defies physics and makes no sense in the comic book, you just kind of accept it
Yeah.
because it's the comic book and it's different rules. But yeah, putting that on there was just amazing. Like both Deadpool and Spider-Man
Yeah,
are great
Deadpool
about
really
that.
established how helpful it can be to give a masked person like a personality. Like I don't know how
Right.
you could do that with Batman, because everything's like sort of armory, but that would make honestly if they could do Batman like the 90s Batman cartoon with the little glowing triangle eyes. Oh man, that would be awesome.
So what did you think of the villain?
I thought this was like without question the best Marvel cinematic universe villain that they've had. I feel like that's all been one of the like biggest weaknesses of the MCU in general is that almost all of the villains are super underdeveloped and even the ones that are okay just fall flat for me. And I feel like I don't know if it's well, I don't think it's just because Michael Keaton is awesome, but he is awesome. But also like his character felt like I understood why he was the way he was. He wasn't just trying to take over the world. He was like taking care of his family or whatever. And he was a really good I forget the term for it, but he was the like equal but alternate path version of Spider-Man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like both of them were trying to take care of their family, and they're both kind of smaller scale people. At the end of the movie, my wife was saying in the car, I hope that he becomes like an anti-hero or a good guy or something. Like she wanted to
Hmm.
see him in future movies and not necessarily just as the bad guy. And I was like, that to me is a mark of a really good villain, is when you kind of like, if you tweak a couple things here and there, he can go from the bad guy to the good guy.
You want me to blow your mind?
Yeah.
I wasn't super impressed with the villain.
Why would that blow my mind?
I don't know, because you just were sitting here singing his
No,
praises.
I thought he was really good. I mean, you can
Well,
be wrong. It's fine.
yeah, true. Well, no, I'll say this. I agree. Like, I like Michael Keaton. I liked him in the movie. He was fine as a villain. It just like, even though I like Michael Keaton and everything, there was nothing like for me super standout about the villain. And maybe his story, maybe it was the story. Like, I see, you said he was super developed and you understood his intentions and reasons. I kind of felt like from the beginning opening scene of the movie, he was just like the government contractors come in there like, "Hey, we're going to take over all this stuff." And he just kind of looks at the camera and he's like, "All right, well, now we're villains." And that's
Really?
what it felt like.
So to me, it was like, again, like Spider-Man, he exists because of the universe that this
Yeah,
movie takes place in. And it's not
right.
just like, oh, I don't like, it's not like these guys are too powerful, therefore I'm against them, like Batman was in Batman vs. Superman. It was like he was a contractor, small town guy. They were working on this
Yeah.
alien technology stuff, tearing that out. And then specifically, Tony Stark comes in and he like takes over their contract and bankrupts his company and sort of forces him into this path where like, okay, well, we have this stuff and I just need to stay afloat to like keep my family, paid for or whatever. And then it kind of slowly turns into a little thing, but he always keeps it small and under the radar. But specifically, he's like, the problem he has and like his sort of anti-hero stance comes down to things that like resonate today. I feel like, where it's like the same people causing the problems are also the people that are profiting.
Right.
And so, he's just trying to take a slice of their pie. He's doing the same thing that the heroes are doing. Like, it was a very
I don't
believable
I don't disagree with that. And I'm not saying necessarily, I guess I'll backtrack. I understand the motivation and I don't even have a problem with it or how, or let me say this, their reasoning for everything with his character. My problem is it just took you about a minute and a half to explain his motivations. And that motivation was pretty much implied and took about 20 seconds for that transformation in the movie. Like from the opening scene, immediately when that happens, he's like, "All right, we're villains now." And then the next time you see them, they're, running a crime thing and it's just implied, "Oh yeah, that's why he's doing it." Which again makes sense,
But
but it's
he
weird
says it a
like,
lot. He gives little speeches about, we're no different. Or I forgot what Tom Holland's little speech saying, this is the bad thing to do or whatever. And his thing was,
yeah.
I'm just doing the same thing that the guys at the top are doing. I can't get away with it because I'm not big enough, which is a
Yeah, but he
sentiment
was
that's
kind
like,
of, but everything was kind of, I'm trying to think of the word. It's not that everything didn't logically make sense as to his motivations and the story and everything. It was that it was, I don't know, kind of like soft. I don't know how else to put it. So, like, for instance, I realize this is a lighthearted movie, so I don't expect this like deep character study of the Vulture for 2 hours. But I also just, I guess that's what I'm saying. I didn't really have a problem with it per se. It just didn't really impact me much at all. Like, I get what they were doing. It all makes sense. It was fine. I love Michael Keaton. He was especially great in a lot of the scenes later on when you find out he's the girl's dad. Like, all of that was fantastic.
that
I
was
loved it.
so good.
Right. I guess my thing though is just that like there's some villains, and I'm trying to think where you do get this like you get more time with them. And kind of part of it too was just like there was no big epic finale. Like I just kind of liked the movie as a whole. Like I enjoyed watching it from start to finish. And certainly stakes get raised, but I guess what I mean
But
is
I liked
like
that.
the villain fight at the end is there's there's the thing on the plane, which there's not much fighting between the two of them, Spider-Man and the Vulture, much. And then at the end, the plane crashes on the beach, and he grabs a box that he should know should be exploding and just kind of flies off. And Spider-Man's like, "Hey, that's gonna explode," and he's like, "I don't care," and then blows up.
Yeah, I agree.
Like that to me was just
The
kind of like
ending, it was like, what are you doing here? At least it didn't.
it
At
was.
least the fight didn't turn into your standard CGI like punch fest, though. I found the whole thing interesting, and I didn't know how they were going to resolve it. So I like that.
And it didn't fall into first wave MCU villain problems where it's like he's too
Yeah,
powerful to kill, so you just kind of have something drop on him.
you got to CGI him to death.
Right, right. And so I didn't have a problem with it from that
And I
angle.
like that.
And
I like that he like
I
rescued him at the end, and he went to prison. I feel like he could be an
yeah,
interesting character going forward.
yeah. So I guess that's just my thing is I was fine with him in the movie, and it's in a weird situation because it sounds like I'm bad mouthing the character or saying I didn't like it, and it's actually not that at
It's
all.
just that
It's
it didn't
just
move
like
you.
it was lukewarm.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
was. I mean, I'm not going to argue that he was a Heath Ledger Joker, right? But
right,
like
right,
after Heath Ledger Joker, what's even next? I mean,
right. Well,
maybe
but
Gene Hackman, Lex Luthor. Uh, But to me, that was always an old movie, so that didn't really do much for me.
there was a Twitter topic that was trending where because of Spider-Man Homecoming, someone started a marketing campaign somewhere where they were like, "Hey, what's your favorite new MCU villains the weekend that Spider-Man Homecoming comes out?" And so of course, like everyone's saying my top 3 are Vulture, and like everyone's saying Vulture. And the whole time I was just thinking like, yeah, Marvel has had slightly a bit of a villain problem. I can name 3 villains I would pick before Vulture though.
Really,
Yeah.
which ones?
I would pick Loki.
See, yeah, everybody loved Loki. I didn't really care for Loki, but I also didn't really like Thor. So I'm pretty like, if you don't like that franchise or movie, you're probably gonna not like the villain as much. So that might be why.
Well, I would pick Loki, I would pick Kingpin, and I would pick Kilgrave. Those would be my top 3.
Which one's Kilgrave?
Jessica Jones.
Okay, yeah, I guess I'm not really including. Like, it feels a little unfair to bring the long form episodic TV series into it.
Okay. Then I would pick Loki. I would pick Dormammu, and then I would pick Ronan.
Dormammu.
Yeah, that was awesome.
I mean, yes, but the villain was like, who cares, right? It was just an awesome scene.
I don't know. Maybe I have a very different criteria because I like the idea of just this completely crazy, like celestial thing, which is yeah. So a strong fourth to me would be Ego from Guardians 2, because I just
Ah.
like the idea of
Now,
a
see,
planet as the
to
villain.
me, the closest one in the MCU would be Jeff Bridges in the first Iron Man.
Jeff Bridges. Oh yeah, that's true.
I thought he was really good, and his like, he was a little like, I'm just a bad guy, so I'm selling arms. But at least it was like a believable character trait.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay, he's the one who had him, set up and everything. I just thought that was an interesting, and I like Jeff Bridges.
Right. But anyways, so now that the villain talk is over, I think we'll just kind of agree to disagree on the villain then.
Yeah.
One thing before
Well,
we
no, you know what we should do is we should get everybody else to comment and tell us what they think.
yeah, tell us who your top 3 go to our page on Facebook at A-Town FM and tell us what your top 3 Marvel villains are.
Yeah, that's a good one. Top 3 Marvel villains, and then I'll have to think through that too. And actually, should we make like a special, like a separate post asking for top 3 Marvel villains?
Yeah, we'll do that for sure.
All right. Yep. Let's do that.
Because
so we'll do that right after this episode drops, I guess.
our millions of listeners are kind of absent-minded sometimes, so sometimes
well,
you got to
right.
prompt
When
them a
you're
little
getting
bit.
hundreds and hundreds of thousands of comments on something, you need to categorize them so that way we
Exactly.
can bundle them up together. I'm gonna keep saying that and being annoying, but all of my favorite podcasts have really like interesting communities and conversations. So I'm hoping we can get that going. We'll see if we can.
I wanted to ask you about one thing that I've seen going around the internet about one of the potential Easter eggs in it. At the end of the movie, after everything's over, Tony Stark takes Peter Parker to the Avengers facility in upstate New York, and he offers to give him this like suit. And I've seen a lot of people point out on the internet that it's from the comic books, and it's like this. It's like the Iron Spider suit, which would make sense because it's coming from Iron Man.
Right.
And apparently, like it's something that Spider-Man in the comic book, I guess, uses for like certain cosmic things. So there's a lot of speculation, and it looks identical to the comic book thing.
Because they're
by
gonna
the
bring
way.
him in for the
Infinity War.
Infinity War.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that's kind of cool. Like that, there's already kind of something planted ahead. But that's really the
Yeah.
only. I guess if you're talking about Easter eggs in the movie, that's really the only stuff I picked up on because I'm not great at that stuff until I've seen it a couple times.
Right.
What did you think
Or
about
read all the articles about it.
what did you think about the first stinger? I was super confused about that because I felt like they
Which
were
one was
still.
the first one? I remember the second one.
The first one was like Keaton being taken to jail and some mysterious figure, and I feel like that's a carryover from the Sony stuff, which was really weird.
Oh, like their whole, what was it, Sinister Six or whatever they were
Yeah,
gonna do.
I was wondering if
So
it's a
I
new
actually
thing
really
or
liked
not.
that. So what I was hoping was going to happen was that he was going to see Kingpin,
Oh yeah,
because that would have been awesome.
Yeah.
Because Michael Keaton and that guy would be great. I like I said, I liked Michael Keaton's character a lot. So I was happy to see like, oh, maybe something interesting will come of him. But the person he was talking to and everything else around it was kind of like, whatever. But if he would have seen Kingpin
Yeah.
and like they were gonna somehow roll that stuff together, because that guy was
I'll
great.
tell you what it felt like to me. It felt like the deal that Marvel had to make in order to get Spider-Man as a character in a movie.
Yeah, like give him a connection to
Yes.
their little.
And it
yeah,
doesn't
we'll see.
make any sense on any level because they're not acknowledging Andrew Garfield. It doesn't work with what they've set up in those two movies. And
Wait, what? Why would it have something to do with Andrew Garfield?
because in the two amazing Spider-Man movies with Andrew Garfield, they've been doing these stingers where there's some mysterious character that's always shadowed in a hat that shows up at some point in the end of the movies to like
Was there a person in a hat in this one?
No, but
Oh, okay.
wasn't there like some sort of implication of somebody, some other guy, like that's like, I forget how exactly the scene played out, but I just remember thinking, oh, is this the stupid
I don't know.
Sony
I didn't
thing?
pick up on that at all.
Yeah, I just really wasn't sure if that was connected to what they were previously setting up at Sony or not. Maybe I'm completely wrong. I hope I am. And so I guess we can leave it at that until we figure out what awful deal Sony is trying to shoehorn themselves into. We are now going to rate all 6 of the Spider-Man movies from worst to best. Neither of us have shown each other our lists, though I have a feeling there will be a lot of
Yeah, I think so.
similarities. So, and I bet you I could guess which one is the worst for you.
I didn't think at all about what you would do because I was trying to think through this accurately. There's only one that I'm not like kind of confident on.
Yeah, there was some tough decisions that had to be made here tonight.
Indeed.
So, what is in your estimation of the 6 movies from all the universes, both Sony and this one, which one is your least favorite?
So this was the easiest decision, I feel like, of all of it. And that would easily be The Amazing Spider-Man 2. That's the second Andrew Garfield one.
That is mine as well.
Yeah.
The only redeeming quality that the second one had was there was a couple of scenes where the soundtrack synced with some of the action that was going on screen, which was cool. And
with the electro stuff?
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
the very end where they actually pulled off, I thought, the famous Gwen Stacy death scene from the comic books. Like that was the only 5 minutes of the movie where I actually like was like, oh, holy crap! They finally pulled something off in this 2.5 hour debacle.
I didn't know that was a famous death scene, so I didn't see it coming, and I was actually really surprised by it.
Right. Yeah, like it wasn't like verbatim, but it essentially like obviously all of these things are adaptations or like remixes of things from the comic books, but they make these like they reenact these iconic things that happened. And yeah, that was like a famous thing. Like when Stacy died, I think, correct. I don't know if you would know better than me or not, but I haven't gone back and read all the original Spider-Man issues like back when it first started. But I believe Gwen Stacy was like the original love interest in Spider-Man, and then it became Mary Jane. So Gwen
That sounds like
Stacy,
something I've read before.
yeah. So Gwen Stacy, like that death, I don't know when exactly that happened. That could have been a storyline later in the 80s or something. I really don't know when that happened, but I do remember it was apparently a big deal in the Spider-Verse at least. And yeah, it was something where like the Green Goblin like dropped her, he wasn't able to catch her in time, and she like broke her back or died,
I should
whatever.
say it's two. It's not that Spider-Man that one was terrible. Like I think I came out of the movie saying, "Oh, that was fine," but it was definitely the least memorable for me. And when I see
Yes.
references to it, normally the references I see, it's like, "Oh yeah, I didn't like that." Like the Green Goblin in that was terrible.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I remember liking it when I saw it in theaters and thinking, well, this wasn't as good as the last one. I was hoping this would be better.
Right.
But I remember thinking, yeah, that was entertaining. And I bought it on Blu-ray, and me and a friend of mine were watching it whenever I was living at my apartment with my Hungarian roommate. And I think because my prior roommate he came from Hungary, and he was born right at the fall of the Berlin Wall and all that sort of stuff. Like he's just naturally pessimistic and hates anything fantastic and like fantasy or sci-fi. And so I remember watching it with one of my friends, and he was sitting in the room, and I just remember feeling embarrassed the whole time it was on. So my view of that movie has actually been tinted for the worst, and maybe
Yep.
it was just
I can see
because he
that.
was there, but yeah, I
It's
the
also
second
at the
time I
peak
watched
of
it,
Spider-Man fatigue, you know.
yes.
Should we move on to number 5?
Yeah, so what's your number 5?
I feel like you might get a little upset at this one, but maybe not. But I have Spider-Man 3, so the third Tobey Maguire Spider-Man. It's not that I didn't like it. It's that I feel like I had to put the first ones of the all three were definitely above that one. I feel
Personal feelings are allowed to come into this. You know that, right?
Are
This
they?
is your opinion. It's not objective. It's not like what does everybody else think.
Well,
It's what do
that's what I'm
you
talking
think.
about, right? That's what I'm saying.
I guess it depends on how you're grading them.
Are you disagreeing with my personal
Yeah.
opinion?
Yeah, it's wrong. You do not think that. Um, my number 5.
I remember in like it was like high school or something, you having a heated debate with like a youth pastor or something at our church
Oh
we went
yes.
to about you were trying to explain why this is good and he was trying to explain why it
I
wasn't.
remember him saying
Neither side could agree.
I
that
remember
the other person
exactly.
could possibly have that opinion.
He actually liked the movie, but he was saying like I had a problem with it because it was essentially the first 2 Spider-Man movies. And I was like, "No, it wasn't. It was completely different." And I was explaining why it was different. And it was like an adult just told a 5-year-old that Santa Claus didn't exist, because then he goes just matter of factly, he goes, "Okay, so basically what happens is there's these villains that show up. They're connected to his past, and then the finale ends with someone kidnaps Mary Jane, and then everything has a big throwdown." I just remember thinking in my head, no.
I refuse to accept your
But
reality.
that's exactly what it was. But no,
what's your 5?
my number 5 is Amazing Spider-Man 1.
Yeah.
It was good, but it's just under the other ones. That one I will actually say, like, I don't look back on that one and dislike it. I will just say I put it there because Andrew Garfield, even though I like him, is my least favorite of the Peter Parkers. Like, I can't think of a single line he ever said in the movies, because his whole character was like nerdy, mumbling, like looking around weird. I can't think of a single line he ever said at all.
I can think of lots of lines that Tobey Maguire said,
yeah,
but
for sure.
Actually, when
In
we were
fact-
watching it today, I actually wrote one down. I did not remember this line at all. But whenever they're in that fire in the building,
Yes.
do you already know what I'm going to say?
No.
Green Goblin had just done the whole like trying to convince him to come to his side thing, you know?
Yeah.
And so the Green Goblin turns around and does his little jump scare scream, and he goes, "Are you in or are you out?" And Spider-Man's line is, "It's you who's out, Gobby, out of his mind." I couldn't believe I didn't remember that. It's so bad.
Those are kind of it's different though, because those are like Sam Raimi movies, and he just has a
Yeah,
whole different
it's
thing
clearly
going on.
it's being cheesy on purpose.
Yeah.
I get that, but it was just
Well,
was
and
funny.
like Green Goblin's motivation is like when he's telling Spider-Man to come to his side. I haven't even watched it recently. I just remember it. It's something like, and then we'll kill people again and again and again until we're both done. And it's like, that's it. That's your plan. Like that's what you're wanting to get done here. Just what do you want to do? I want to kill people. All right. So what is your number 4?
All right, so number 4. I lost my list here. All right, my number 4 is Amazing Spider-Man, the first one.
Okay. So the Andrew Garfield.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. My number 4 is the first Tobey Maguire Spider-Man.
Whoa. Okay. Interesting.
Because it's obviously it's what started it all, so that was a tough decision to make. But I had to place some things in the top 3, so that one had to go somewhere, and it had to go at number 4. But I will say definitively,
wow,
the top 4 are all ones that I could any day. Someone could say, "Hey, you want to watch the Spider-Man movies?" And I would sit down in an instant and watch.
Yeah. See, that's interesting. I feel like one, especially because in my head, I'm thinking of these in the context of when they came out.
Mm-hmm.
So when one came out, I mean, there was the first X-Men, I think, before that.
Yeah.
But like that even wasn't anywhere close to how advanced Spider-Man 1 was.
Right.
Like that did some crazy stuff with CG and everything. But I just feel like everything that did for the superhero franchises in general was amazing.
Oh, yeah. It definitely had a big influence on it. For sure. I'm not disagreeing at all.
I just can't believe you put Spider-Man 3 over 1.
You mean yeah. It's my criteria. I have it for sentimental reasons.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I pointed that out for everybody, that you thought Spider-Man 3 was better than Spider-Man 1.
So what is your number 3?
Did you tell me your number? Oh, yeah, you did. That was what we were just talking about. All right, my number 3 is Spider-Man Homecoming, the one that just came out.
That's mine as well.
Yeah. I thought it was awesome.
So how about number 2?
Number 2 would be Spider-Man 2.
Okay. All right.
Which I would actually argue is the best of all of them. Mm-hmm. But because of what I was saying before, I was kind of thinking of them in terms of relative to when they came out.
Right.
And one made such a big advance in things. I felt like that made it bigger.
Well,
I'm questioning that was my one that I was the most like questionable on.
My number 2 is Spider-Man 3. And so that obviously that makes both of our number 1s. Yours is Spider-Man 1 with Tobey, and mine is Spider-Man 2. I picked Spider-Man 3 for number 2 because I realize that it's not everyone's favorite, but there's just something, like, for one, it holds sentimental reasons to me. That was probably my junior year in high school when that came out. So I have a lot of... That was
me and my wife's first date.
Was it?
Yeah.
That's great.
It was great.
Perfect first
date. That and S&J's snow cone afterwards.
Nice.
Yeah. Doesn't get any more Arnold than that, does it?
No, it does not. I don't think you could. But yeah, I put it there just because I have that sentimental reasons that I like it. I very cheesily felt like it had a big impact on my life at the time. Like, I felt like I could relate to everything that was going on in the movie. Like,
you and Topher Grace were in the same place in your life.
Yeah. I understood the metaphor of the black suit taking him over, and
that was your emo phase, wasn't it?
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah. Oh man, we got to dig up a picture of that awesome hair you had.
Yeah, maybe someday. We'll get
I bet
to that
I can
someday.
find one.
Yeah. So that had a big place in my life, and so that's the reason why I put it at number 2. Now I'm breaking my own rule. I didn't put it at number 1 because objectively I just don't think it's the best, and I understand already.
It would have been your number 1 though.
Yeah, I understand already at number 2, people are already kind of skeptical. But
See, I feel like number 2 is like before the Marvel Universe stuff started.
mhm.
Spider-Man 2 seemed to be right up there with The Dark Knight in terms of people's favorite superhero movies.
Yes. I was
Like
going
it
to
was
say
I feel like it was
that's
referenced all the
why.
time as that, but when I brought that up recently, everybody around me has always looked at me like I'm crazy. So
A lot
I
of
guess it didn't maintain that
that's
legacy.
because like these weird like as time passes these weird like rumors like a comedian will make a joke out of something, and if that comedian or a couple of comedians are big enough, it like sinks into
The
oh,
zeitgeist.
yeah, because that's happened with a lot of things. Like for instance, I mean, you'll agree with some of this, but just kind of step outside your personal taste for a moment. But there's things like the Star Wars prequels, the Hobbit prequels, and or like the Spider-Man movies because of Tobey Maguire's crying. Like people will make jokes
And
about
yeah,
that.
Tobey Maguire's general hamminess combined
Yeah.
with the sort of
And so
2000s-ness of everything in those.
yeah, and so like enough comedians, like I've heard comedians actually make jokes about all three of those movies, and because the whole point of comedy is to be extreme and just say like, yeah, so the new Star Wars prequel sucked. I mean, like if they just say something like that, then everybody it just kind of seeps into the conscious. They're like, oh yeah, I guess no one really liked those movies and they were kind of a letdown. But it's like, yeah, but you realize like even critically, most all of those now those were just a couple examples, but things like that. You look back and you're like, actually, no, like those broke the box office. They even got more good
Well,
reviews than they did negative.
right.
All of that sort of stuff. Like and it's even the same with Spider-Man 3. Spider-Man 3 is normally the one that's pointed to and being like, "Oh man, that was so weird with the dance scene in the jazz club."
Ah, that's so great.
Yeah, which those are all the reasons I like it is just because it's so crazy and just off the wall. And I don't think a
Right.
lot of people realize that was tongue in cheek. Like people that like Sam Raimi, I think got it. Like they're like, "Oh, he's the one that made Evil Dead," and like this is kind of what he does, is slapstick and like this weird stuff. And he has his own way of doing things. And so I think I get the feeling that just like a lot of people, because of camaraderie, when comedians make fun of something, they'll just be like, "Oh yeah, I guess people really didn't like that," and they haven't really seen it in a while, or it didn't have a big impact on them personally. So it like affects people's perception of things. But you go back and look at those movies, like all three of the Spider-Man movies, for instance, with Tobey Maguire, set box office records at the time they came out, and even the third one had a good, like for instance, if you just go by Rotten Tomatoes, it had good reviews. It was a
Actually,
success.
while you were talking and I was totally ignoring you, I just went through and found all the Rotten Tomatoes scores. So let's go through really quick what your rating is. Go from top to bottom of yours.
uh, so my last place was
No, start at first.
oh, my first one is Spider-Man 2, and then Spider-Man 3, and then Spider-Man Homecoming, and then Spider-Man 1, and then Amazing Spider-Man, and then Amazing Spider-Man 2.
All right, and mine was Spider-Man 1, Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man Homecoming, Amazing Spider-Man, Spider-Man 3, and then Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we walk down the Rotten Tomatoes scores,
Mm-hmm.
actually we could walk, yeah, we'll walk down since I just did that. So at the very top would be Spider-Man 2, which
Boom.
feels objectively correct.
Yes.
The next,
Why
and
don't
that
you
was
go
with a
ahead and
90,
tell us that score,
94%.
just so that the viewers at home will know?
How correct we are.
Spider-Man 2. Yeah,
That would be
just
that would
Spider-Man
be
2.
94% on
Yes.
Spider-Man 2.
Thank you.
And then Spider-Man Homecoming is next at 93%.
Mm-hmm.
So right next door. And then next would be Spider-Man 1 at 89%.
Mm-hmm.
And then comes a semi-decent drop that gets us to Amazing Spider-Man, the first Andrew Garfield one.
Mm-hmm.
That's at 72%.
Mm-hmm.
And then Spider-Man 3 is 63%.
Yep, that's about right.
And then Amazing Spider-Man is the only rotten one at 52%.
Yeah.
Which, why is that rotten? I thought rotten was anything under 50. I guess not.
No, it's once you hit 59, It goes
Ooh,
rotten. But
okay.
everyone has their own personal criteria. Like there's some people that don't care about Rotten Tomatoes at all, which is fine if you like
No, yeah.
movies that.
To me, it's just it's a way to set my expectations.
Yeah.
Like if I see something's at a 45%, that doesn't mean I won't like it. It just means I'm expecting a movie that is in this sort of
Right.
area.
Well,
That could mean it's a popcorn movie, and I'm fine with that. But at least I know that going in.
so real quick then, what were your favorite Peter Parkers from
Oh, okay.
worst to best?
All right, worst. I would have to say Tobey Maguire would be the worst, especially after watching him a little bit today. It was a reminder of how like incorrectly cast he was in terms of like age.
So you're not
He
saying
did
his
not
acting
pull off a
ability is
kid.
necessarily bad. It was just a weird pick for Peter Parker.
Yeah, I mean he was like, and he was just so cheesy, which again, to a degree, is on purpose, but some of it's just like him and Mary Jane. They're especially in one, their chemistry is just super awkward.
Oh,
I
see,
feel
like
like.
I I disagree. Like, see, as we're speaking, I don't know if I would put him at number one or two. Um, but like the reason why I'm struggling with that is because I know people like to make jokes and all this stuff about Peter Parker's crying as Tobey Maguire and this and that,
I'm
and
ignoring.
I
I'm
get
not even
that.
talking about the
I
crying.
think
I'm just saying, generally
I think
speaking.
one of the strongest parts that made those Spider-Man movies so charming, if that's a good word to do, is Kirsten Dunst and Tobey Maguire's chemistry worked really well. And
I
I'm
think
not
it
the
was probably
only.
better in 2 and 3,
Yeah,
but one was he was just kind of awkward, creepy most of the time, and it felt like he was delivering lines a lot.
you didn't
Which I again
you
like
didn't
a lot of
like
it
the
was
hospital
he was
scene.
saying cheesy stuff. That's mainly what I'm talking about.
Well, I says to him, I says Spider-Man.
Do it. You
She
can do the whole thing. I
makes
know you can.
she's so beautiful. Just makes
You're
you
delivering it with
feel.
the same amount of believability as he did.
That's not true.
I haven't seen you smile since Mary Jane was here. You were supposed to be asleep.
You were supposed to be asleep. None of it's as bad as James Franco's acting at that time. I
So good.
distinctly remember in the second Spider-Man, or maybe it's it's the second one because Dr. Octavius, when his experiment fails, he's like getting in his car after the lab blew up, and he's like, and like someone's like, "Thank God Spider-Man was here to save us." He's like, "I hate Spider-Man. He humiliated me by touching me," and that was the line. And he like puts on his sunglasses and gets in his expensive car.
I think the scene in, is it 3?
Mm-hmm.
No, it's 2. Whenever he is eating that pie
That's
and he
3.
looks up.
That's 3.
Okay.
That was great.
When he's eating that pie and he looks up and he's just
So
like,
good.
so good. That was when he became James Franco.
Yes.
The weird, creepy man that he is today can all be traced back to that slice of pie. That's what I think.
Strawberry.
All right, what's your number 2?
I never gave you number 3. My number 3 is Andrew Garfield. Yeah, he's not bad. Just yeah.
Yeah, just not as good. Fair enough. My number 2 is Andrew Garfield.
Yeah, I would say now that I'm thinking about it, I would say Tobey Maguire just because even though I would like to say he's first because he's my favorite because I like those movies more. He is a weird pick for Peter Parker. Like I'm fine with him as an actor and everything, but you've convinced me. I mean, it is weird seeing a 30-year-old man play a high schooler.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, we were
yeah.
looking it up. He was 27
ooh.
in the first one, and then Mary Jane was 20, I believe. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, once they were in college, it wasn't as bad.
Yeah, that's true.
One thing I feel like we shouldn't go through a Spider-Man ranking without mentioning J. Jonah Jameson or J.K.
Oh,
Simmons.
That is
Holy cow.
That is the one black hole in the new Spider-Man Homecoming. That is
For sure.
That is
But
the
honestly,
thing that's missing.
anybody else playing that is just going to feel wrong, right?
Yeah.
Like, he was so good.
And unfortunately, now he's playing Commissioner Gordon in the DC, which looks amazing. Him as Commissioner Gordon. I don't know if you've seen any of
Interesting.
the stuff.
I just hope he's not too
He's like,
DC about it. Is he all dark and gloomy?
it's weird because he got ripped for the part. I have no idea why, but there was like these pictures of him with this massive beard and just like bulked out at the gym.
He's kind of a character actor, isn't he?
Yeah, yeah. So
Like,
maybe
he
it
gets
was for
way
something
into
else.
his roles.
But
Well, it might have been
the,
for this. Like, he wanted to fit into that
well,
universe.
for the 2 seconds that you see him in the Justice League trailer, which may have been so fast that you didn't even notice it, but he's like in a trench coat and like a old timey detective hat. So I actually like him visually. Like, he's wearing the glasses, he's got the mustache and everything. He looks like Jim Gordon, so he'll be fine. He just won't be J. Jonah Jameson.
All that I ask is that we get a J. Jonah Jameson shirtless scene. All right. So, last one. I guess we both agree Tom Holland is the best
appropriate.
Spider-Man. I
Yes.
think that's going to... I don't think that's just because we just saw it. I really think that that's going to
he's
be
age appropriate.
long-term.
He strikes the feels and sounds like a New Yorker.
And feels like a
very good.
modern-day, like, dorky, smart kid.
Yeah,
Like, he fits
Absolutely.
that, fits that really well.
right.
Also, we didn't mention Chair Kid. I forgot what his name was in the movie.
Oh yeah, that
He was great.
Yeah, he was hilarious.
I really, really liked him. I thought
I liked the addition of that sidekick character. That was great.
he really helped with that whole coming of age part of that story. I feel like.
Yeah, I'm interested in seeing. Yeah, obviously they'll probably still have him in the next movie, so it'll be interesting to see where the series goes. Whether it'll keep him in high school, like I imagine they could still
or if they'll
milk
like
that
keep
for another movie.
weave him into the bigger pictures or everything, which
Yeah,
I wouldn't be as big of a fan of. But I also think all of the other movies would be better with a little bit of Spider-Man. So
if they keep doing good, like I feel like Spider-Man's their next tentpole after Avengers, because I mean they're
kind
still
of the coming of the new.
they're still doing good, but
guard.
they're going to be like phasing out. Well, I don't know this for sure, but I feel like based on contracts and news that comes out all the time, they're going to be phasing out the big four original Avengers, and maybe
Feels
they'll
like they
still show up and they'll be there peripheral and have cameos. But I feel like smartly they're moving into, all right, let's just do something fresh and new and do all these weird, bizarre characters like Ant-Man and the Wasp and Doctor Strange and Guardians and Spider-Man. That's all fine. So
yeah, I'm good with that.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, if anybody wants to give us some feedback on Facebook, if you think we're wrong about any of our rankings, if you loved the movie, if you hated the movie, anything you want to tell us about Spider-Man Homecoming, feel free to contact us on Facebook at ATownFM, no dash, or you can find us on Twitter, the same address, and we also have a website with a comment section, and feel free to find us there and tell us what you think, if we're stupid, if we have the worst opinions in the world, or we would always love if you liked or shared our Facebook page or left us a review on iTunes.
Yes. Please leave us a review on iTunes if it's positive. We should probably mention next episode, we will not be doing a movie review. We don't plan on this being just a movie review podcast. Just so happened the two movies that we were both excited about came out right at the same time. So that's why you're getting two in a row. So
yeah, movies will always be something we kind of talk about, but it'll never be like we're always going to sit down and analyze and review movies. Like it might just be a small 10, 15-minute segment of something, but these were just...
And anytime we do anything with spoilers like that, we'll always put it at the end so that you can listen up until that point if you want to.
Sounds good.